och välkomna tillbaka till studion i Entreprenörsjakten live. Ni är förhoppningsvis på en lunch, det får inte vi ännu. Vi sitter i studion live istället. Vi fick en lite intressant fråga här på Twitter faktiskt.
Adrian har stängt av sin mygga här så att...
Hörs nu?
Ja!
Ja, nu är vi här.
Hörde någon vad jag sa? Hur som helst, vi fick en lite intressant fråga på Twitter där vi har hashtaggen e-jakten. Det var en tjej som frågade, är det att de jagar ett e? Men en kort brief, så vi har 72 deltagare uppdelade i 24 lag i Stockholm, Göteborg, Sundsvall som är ute på plats hos företag och utför uppdrag och löser problem och kommer med idéer. Och de kommer bedömas av en jury som består av personer från de här företagen. Och vi livesänder här. Vi har intervjuer som kommer in med videoklipp. Vi har intervjuer med folk ute på plats som deltagare som står nervösa inför uppdrag och partners. Och vi har gäster här i soffan. Och nu har vi faktiskt en litet block här som kommer vara på engelska. Så jag kommer switcha över till engelska och vi kommer prata om starting and running a successful company. Eller snarare en startup som det kallas. We have Matt and Therese here, Therese Gedda. And Matt, you have been involved in several startups.
Yes.
And can you tell us some about the startups that you've been involved in and the part you have?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of been a jack of all trades. I like to consider myself somewhat of a serial entrepreneur. So my first company was at 24,
right.
And it was a property services company in San Diego, which my partner and I built up to be one of the largest in the county at that time. We were bought out within 2 years, and at the same time, subsequently, we rolled it into a real estate investment firm, which then morphed into an online vacation rental platform, which was actually at that time the first in the United States. So it garnered quite a bit of attention, and we built a lot of proprietary software around that, and basically taught ourselves along the way. You know, we really didn't have any specific experience in any one area. We just sort of learned as we went and saw the openings in the market and sort of attacked it where we saw fit. Right now I just mentor and sit on the board of quite a few smaller startups throughout mainly the United States, but a couple in Canada as well.
All right. And we'll come back to your history and the startups you're involved in, and we'll introduce Therese. You are an action-oriented entrepreneur with a background in management, consulting, inspirational education, and also strategic advising to executives and entrepreneurs in Sweden.
That's right.
And right now you are the CEO and the founder of the company Excellencia.
Yeah.
What is Excellencia and what do you do?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to take the opportunity to thank you for being invited. It's a great...
Good to have you here.
It's good to have you.
Yeah.
It's good to have you.
Excellencia, we are working with impact creation, which lies in the intersection with executive education and consulting. Working with packages designed for successful companies and entrepreneurs, as well as individuals, to go from success to excellence in the fields of communication, efficiency, and profitability. And what we are right now is that a couple of weeks ago we had a red carpet launch with champagne, live entertainment, all that good stuff. And now we are looking for taking the company to the next step.
So you would consider Excellencia as a startup, right?
Well, in one sense it is, because we try to keep the entrepreneurial spirit and the entrepreneurial enthusiasm in the company, as well as combining it with a more corporate philosophy. We're already 20 people working with it and come quite far. So yes and no, depending on how you define a startup.
Yeah. Okay, I think we will come back to the definition of a startup and speak about that and the difference between America and Sweden. But when you start your company, what questions are you valuable to ask yourself?
Well, this is a great question, and there's a lot of things to consider when starting a company. I would like to group this in three different parts. or 3 different kind of questions that you can ask yourself. Number 1 is why, questions that are connected to why. Why are you starting the company? Why is this different? Why is this important to you and to your potential clients? Number 2 is about your potential and your strength. So is this company or what you're doing in the company in alignment with what you're great at and you're really passionate about, and you're working your strengths, so to say, and not working with your weaknesses, because it's quite difficult to always work with the weaknesses as an entrepreneur. So it's more fun and more profitable to work with strength. And the fourth one the third one obviously is about the client. Who's the client? Why, what kind of problems are you solving for the client? And why is this a great product or a service to bring to the market from the client perspective? So probably those 3.
I was going to say I have a different perspective regarding the strengths versus weaknesses, because I think too many people rely upon what they're good at, and then they feel that they need to go into something that they're quote unquote their trade or whatever. And I think more, at least from my perspective, if you're a serial entrepreneur and you're always looking into businesses, it's more about market entry and you're just good at business, or you're good at creating. You don't have to necessarily be good at IT or anything like that. That's sort of where I come from. But I agree with most everything else.
But I like the point that you don't need an idea. That you're actually starting out from yourself. And that's one of the reasons why I started this competition. I wanted to bring focus more on the person, on the entrepreneur, and what your skills are and what you want to do, and not focus on, there's so many idea competitions and business plan competitions.
And you're from Canada, right?
I grew up in Canada. I'm American though, so I don't know if you want to cut that out.
No, because of that, we're speaking about weaknesses and strengths here, and weaknesses and failure. Isn't that a big difference between Sweden and America? That you have another perspective on weaknesses and also failure.
I mean, I can't talk about too much about the Swedish market, except that the culture seems to be more reserved and risk adverse, whereas in North America, especially in California, you kind of like your badge of honor is to fail. And if people get into these bragging competitions, like how much money they lost, it's almost like a Vegas thing. And it's not that fun when you're in the middle of it, but afterwards you sort of kind of wear that with pride if you've turned something else around.
Yeah, right. And have you been there with your startups?
Yeah, of course. I've been there. I mean, I think it's foolish to say that you'll never have it happen, and you learn along the way and all the cliches that go with it. But of course, and actually our first company was so successful so fast that you don't really learn, the hard way first, which I think is important to do. Because
you're too successful.
Yeah.
That's good for you.
And then actually the second one was actually really successful, and the recession hit, and it absolutely crushed us. And we made a lot of mistakes along the way. We didn't prepare for it. So I think just youth and ego and everything else mixed into one. But they're lessons that I think everybody should learn, because down the road you'll create a much more structured and viable business.
Yeah, all right. We'll come back to what we speak about right now and about the startup and how to run a successful company. Right now we're going to... I switched to Swedish now. Vi ska flytta över till Svenskt Näringsliv. Jag tror att det är en lunch som pågår, och träffa lite folk där. Så vi är strax tillbaka.
Hej, nu är vi här från Stockholm på Svenskt Näringsliv, och här har vi 2 projektledare och en arkitekt. Hur kommer det sig att ni anmälde er till Entreprenörsjakten?
Det var väl egentligen en självklarhet så fort vi hittade den att vi skulle ansöka. Vi har inte sett den här tävlingen innan, och vi är entreprenörer alla 3. Jag kände att en sån här utmaning kan man ju bara inte missa.
Härligt. Hur tycker ni dagen har varit så här långt?
Oerhört spännande och kul. Vi ser fram emot resten av dagen extremt mycket. Det kanske vi kan bärga oss. Vi vill bara ha i oss mat så att vi kan springa vidare.
Tar ni med oss någonting härifrån?
Allt vi gör så tar man ju med sig någonting. Och egentligen alla uppdrag och utmaningar som vi har hittills kan man ju ta vidare och använda liksom i sitt eget företagande. Även om det kanske inte är någonting liksom konkret sådär. Och själva stämningen, liksom, att springa ut på stan och göra utmaningar, det är fantastiskt. Vilken möjlighet.
Har ni hittat någon konkret idé redan nu som ni vill fortsätta jobba på?
Vi har ju faktiskt startat ett eget företag som heter just Tvåprojektet, en arkitekt, en konsultfirma. Och har tänkt att fortsätta på den här banan med att gå in på företag och vända upp och ner helt enkelt. Utmana Sveriges företag.
Det är ett konsultbolag som vi startade för några veckor sedan när vi fick våra första utmaningar. Och vi tänker utmana svenska företag att slänga gamla rutiner och förbereda sig för framtiden helt enkelt.
Härligt. Vad hoppas ni på i eftermiddag? Vad är drömuppdraget?
Oj. Drömuppdraget?
Jag gillar ju film. Så att jag hoppas att vi får filma lite tokigheter ute på stan. Det är det jag hoppas på.
Jag skulle nu vilja gå in på ett riktigt stort bolag. Ett gigantiskt bolag och få lov att presentera marknadsstrategi eller sociala medier eller något sånt.
Jag tycker faktiskt det är väldigt spännande som vi gjort hittills. Att vi har ställts inför extrema utmaningar som vi inte har varit beredda på. Så jag ser faktiskt fram emot mer oväntade
extrema utmaningar. Ja.
Jag vill
sjukt taggade.
Jag vill ha konferensrum och kostymer helt enkelt.
Vi är taggade helt enkelt.
Ja.
Härligt. Vi har ett sjukt taggat lag här och massa taggade lag nere i lunchrummet som bara väntar på att få komma ut i eftermiddag. Men det var nog allt från oss här. Så tack så hemskt mycket.
All right, we're back in the studio in Stockholm, and we met some competitors. What do you say?
And one of our teams.
I want to let Gustav introduce the entrepreneurial chase and what it is and what you do in English for our English viewers.
For the international people. Well, the entrepreneurial chase, or Entreprenörsjakten in Swedish, I came up with this idea in 2007. We did this in Chicago. I was studying at Illinois Institute of Technology, and I was the president of the student organization for entrepreneurship. And the idea was basically to make a competition, an entrepreneurship competition that focused on people and the talents required to be an entrepreneur, instead of idea competition and business plan competitions. I thought there was too much focus on, well, you need to invent a new Google to start a business, and that's not really what it's about. So basically, through the course of one day, a number of teams, we're running 8 teams right now in each city, visit companies. And in each location, they get an assignment. And they span different areas, from marketing to finance to sales to HR and recruitment. So we try to hit all the different types of knowledge, the different types of abilities you need to have as an entrepreneur. And at the same time, we're actually working with real problems in real businesses, trying to provide value for our partners. And I started this up in Sweden in 2008, and now in 2010 we're doing this in 3 cities: Gothenburg, Stockholm, Sundsvall, and we've got the big final coming up in 2 weeks on the 13th. And also the original idea from Chicago is still living on, and it's called the Chicago Innovation Chase. And it's now 8 schools, I think, in the Midwest area that all have regional competitions and a big final that's, I think, is coming up in the beginning of next semester.
Kind of the same concept.
Yeah.
And this is what we're speaking about here today also. What does it take to be an entrepreneur and to run a successful company? And we were speaking about weaknesses before, and I think you wanted to add something there about weaknesses and failure, and if you compare Sweden to America. And
yeah, well, just regarding focusing on the strengths rather than your weaknesses, the way to, or from my perspective at least, is that if you have the opportunity to pick to work as a in marketing or sales, and you're really passionate about that, that makes a lot of sense. And then complement your team with people that are really great at technical, solving problems from a technical perspective, or actually running and leading the company. That's more the one perspective I would like to bring up. Of course, you need to be able to do a lot of different things, and that's just part of being an entrepreneur, right? But at the same time, if you can choose, and when you're picking a team, to have people that combines your strength with their strength, that makes a lot of sense, and it makes it a bit easier sometimes. Regarding the question, failure, mistakes, well, I think if we start to look about failure as something we learn from, instead of that it's actually something horrible, it's easier to deal with it. Because being an entrepreneur, it's part of trying new things, and you need to fail in order to succeed. I had an opportunity to meet a Stanford professor last May, Tina Sealing, and I think her quote actually sums it up great, which is that if you want more success, you are going to be willing to live with more failure. That failure is the flip side of success, and you can't have one without another.
And this is what we were speaking about before also with you, Matt, that you've been running several startups or being involved in, and been hitting some walls. Yeah. And can you tell us more about what happened when you were there?
You mean in the dark place?
Yeah, in the dark place.
I don't think you ever leave the dark place necessarily. I think you, especially as you get older, you kind of hold on to it because you know the alternative. Yeah. But the biggest thing is I've been very, very lucky to have a really strong support system, so especially with my family. You know, I was sort of getting pedigreed to do one sort of career, but then when I said, I want to try these kind of things, they were very, very supportive. And I think that's the biggest thing, whether you surround yourself with friends, family, co-workers, somebody that can support you in those times. And you know, it's fine when you're just shooting the shit and somebody can relate to you and say, you know, I've been there, I've lost a bunch of money, or I made stupid mistakes too. You need to surround yourselves with those people, sort of the winners and losers, and you all come together at the same time. I think that's the most important thing, to get through it.
And Therese, what would you think is the most important guidelines for an entrepreneur to think about?
Well, I think there's a lot of them. What I have worked with some of my clients over the years is there are 7. And just to pick some of them, one of them is actually the support system, and that you should create it and cherish it and take good care of it. But some of the other things is that if you have a vision, it's about working for your vision and make the vision work for you. And what I mean with that is that when it gets hard, when you're in the situation that you can pick this road or the other road, the vision can be starting to working for you as a sort of guideline already there. But obviously, working towards the vision, that's part of being an entrepreneur, working towards goals, right? Another thing I would say regarding these are understand and prioritize flow and momentum. When you are in that setting that you're really passionate what you're doing and the time stops, be aware of the importance of that and work with the kind of task that is really important to you at those times and those situations. And don't try not to schedule meetings, and don't be too curious about interruptions that time, but really keep it to yourself and work with issues that are challenging and a bit difficult, because it's so much easier. And the third part, obviously there are 7, but would be to create the accountability system, to create some kind of accountability in your day-to-day work, either working with a friend or someone from your support system or your team, to create accountability in the company to actually make it moving forward every day. So that's great help.
I actually...
Can you hold that thought?
Because we have a quick one. I actually sometimes call my mother to tell her that I'm going to clean my room, my apartment, so to create external accountability.
Right. Anyway, we'll be back here in a minute, and we're going to an interview in Sundsvall right now. So over to Sundsvall.
Ja, då står vi här i Sundsvall på torget. Och här är ett lag som deltar i Entreprenörsjakten. Hur känns det än så länge?
Det känns väldigt bra, måste jag säga. Peak Ideas, vi har levererat ett par Peak Ideas till läget.
Ja. Hur känner ni er unika jämfört med andra lag? Vad känner ni att ni har liksom för kvaliteter som kan få er att, liksom, att tro på själva?
Jag tror att vi har en väldigt bra mix i laget av kompetens. Vi täcker väldigt många områden och kan ganska mycket om det vi kan också faktiskt.
Hur liksom i de uppdrag ni har haft nu, känner ni liksom som ni har fått fram det ni har fått, det ni har liksom känt bekväma med?
Ja, alltså det tycker jag verkligen att vi har gjort. Absolut. Jag tycker det har varit utmanande men ändå ganska genomförbara. Och verkligen, vi har kommit på idéer som jag tror inte vi hade kommit på om vi inte hade ställt med sådana utmaningar.
All right. Vi ska hoppa vid ett annat lag här också. Och det är lag... Vad heter ni? M.
Ja.
Hur känns det? Hur har dagen varit?
Det har varit kul. Det var jätteroligt. Ja, jättekul. Ja, så det känns bra. Ja.
Dagen har ju bara börjat, det är ju mycket kvar liksom. Hur har ni förberett och känner ni fortfarande taggade? Liksom, ni har fortfarande samma energi, det är inte...
Ja, gud ja. Nu har vi ätit mat också.
Nervösa?
Nej. Det ska bara bli kul. Ja.
Mm. Vad har ni, de här cases ni haft nu, känner ni att ni har fått ut det ni har, de idéer som ni känner liksom nöjda med eller?
Ja, jag tycker vi känner oss nöjd. Vi har velat. Ja, det har gått jättebra.
Vilka företag har ni varit nu?
Vi har varit Åkroken, Science Park och Mittuniversitetet. Ja, och Mittuniversitetet.
Ja, men då får jag önska lycka till. Så får ni köra hårt.
Tack.
Ja. Och tackar vi från Sundsvall och gå tillbaka till studion.
Yes, and we're back in the studio in Stockholm. That was some interviews with the teams in Sundsvall at Stortorget. I think at Stortorget. Stortorget. I think they have lunch up there. Anyway, we're speaking about what does a startup and entrepreneur needs, and Gustav said that he's usually calls his mother when he needs.
No, but I think that is important to, because I mean, as an entrepreneur, you have no one else to depend on except yourself for accountability. I mean, yes, as soon as you get external capital or whatever, that is, of course, you get some kind of external accountability. But I think that's important to get early on, to start promising things to other people and say, hey, look me in the eye, I'm going to do this, and because that helps you when no one is telling you what to do, no one's telling you when to get up in the morning, no one's waiting at the office to see if you actually came in there at 8:30. Or I don't know, 7:30 if you're a good entrepreneur, 9:30 if you're me.
But I think that's the biggest downfall is, you know, everybody likes to think of themselves as to be able to do this kind of thing, this whatever this entrepreneurship is. But when push comes to shove, you know, you have beers with people and sitting there and they have this fantastic idea. You're like, well, it's interesting, you know. So what are you going to do about it? Well, you know, I need to do this and this and this. And you talk to them in 3 weeks and they're on to something else or they haven't really followed through. And I mean, that really sort of separates the men from the boys. Sorry. No. But in terms of who actually mans up and follows through with what they say they're going to do. And very, very few people do. Everybody has a big idea and everybody thinks they're going to be the next, you know, Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg. Very, very few actually try to even get to that point. And if they don't reach any sort of some semblance of that level, they quickly pull the ripcord and bail out.
Why do you think that some people does it and some doesn't take the idea from the idea stadium to the next step?
I didn't used to believe in the whole adage that you have to be a little bit nuts to do this, but I truly, you know, I'm 33 now and I've done it for almost 15 years, so I truly think you have to be a little bit schizophrenic in some regard to be able to deal with the ups and downs, you know, because it's very tempting to take that solid paycheck and get that, you know, every time you walk into the bank account, you can pull money out and know it's always going to come in there and you have your 9 to 5. I think it takes somebody that just wants that just thinks a little bit bigger, you know, and they're really creative, and they want to see their creativity become some sort of tangible asset, and that takes a little bit of nuts, you know, craziness. That's my personal view.
So, Therese, what do you think is the most challenging when starting a company?
Well, I think there's a lot of challenging parts of it, but as Matthew is talking about here, it's all about the execution. To get the orders, to get the office space, to get the people around you to believe in your idea. And it's important that you really love what you're doing, because you will talk about your business and your idea over and over and over again, so that helps. And the other part is to be patient and actually trust the process, and be okay with the fact that things are not happening overnight. And to combine those two, the execution mind, but also the patience, I think that could be very challenging sometimes.
I absolutely agree. I mean, this is I've been working with this company, the Entrepreneurial Chase, for 2.5 years now, like full time, and add that whatever I did in Chicago before that. And I'm 28. I've never devoted more than 6 months on a single thing before this. All through my academics, I just, okay, what am I going to do next semester? What am I going to do next semester? I switched majors 7 times in 4.5 years. And that's, you know, that's great.
Wow.
That's great. That's great, but and I wanted to just start this and have it work, you know, everything at the same time. And now 3 years later, there's still so many things that I want to do, and it takes so much time and it goes so slow. So yes, there's so much patience, and I'm not a patient person.
But that's, I mean, that's sort of like indicative of our generation. I mean, we're close to the same age group. But if you look at sort of, you know, the history of the United States and the foundation of all the big businesses there, for instance, they've generations, you know, generational. And people persevered, and they put in all their time with their family business and their shop, and they grew it up, and that's what they wanted to do. Whereas now you get this thing where kids, it's, you know, like you said, 6 months. It's like, it's not worth it. Well, you know, it takes, you know, you barely get an internet hookup within 6 months, you know. And like I opened a call center up in the Caribbean, and it literally took me about half a year just to get the right infrastructure to get the telephones working. And, you know, by that time, everybody I talked about said, you got to leave, you got to get out of there, you know. And you just know you have to lay the foundation, and too many people are too quick to remove themselves if it's not instant cash flow and Groupon success kind of things.
I was just going to say Groupon.
Yeah,
you know.
but and that's the problem, is that's all you read about in these magazines now. Is, you know, some dude throws a website up, and in 12 weeks he's bought by Yahoo for 20 million. It's like, come on, that's not reality. And if you put that and compare yourself constantly to that, you're always going to be disappointed. You're going to feel like, I really need to find the next, you know, asset that'll get me to that multi-million-dollar level within a month and a half. And if you go with that attitude, you're bound to fail. I think if you go with a long-term strategy and build a good company, and then someone comes along and wants to buy you, that's a whole different thing. But if you're just looking for that sort of quick turnaround, you're going to be disappointed, I think.
So we're talking about startups here, and we said earlier that we have to define what is a startup, and we mentioned Groupon, for example. But at first, what is the difference? We can start with, how do you define a startup in America?
I mean, I think everybody has their own definition.
Okay,
right?
what's your definition?
Well, it depends if I'm trying to pick up a girl or not. Like a startup could mean one guy with a newspaper route, or a startup could mean, you know, 15 people in an office that's been around for 3 years. I think a startup is all about it comes more to the cultural aspect of it, where your accountability lies. If you have big investors behind you that are pushing you, I think at that point you're not really a startup anymore. You know, you're sort of a invested in asset or something to that effect. I think a startup is more the garage above your mom's house, you know, really drinking the Red Bull and kind of crushing out code for 36 hours. I think that's when you're in the startup phase. And anything after that is sort of, now you're into the business. Now you better put a suit on, kind of thing.
Because I think
it's funny because that word, it's a pretty fresh word in the English language too. But the word startup is used in Sweden. In the Swedish language it's become a term of its own. And it's more it's very much connected to the tech sector, of course, but it's also the mentality, because I think the startup mentality is a bit more exit focused than what you're talking about.
But I think that's been applied to by the VCs and the PEs, you know, that they put that label, okay, we want to exit this startup within X amount, but I understand what you're saying, it's become like an industrialized term almost. Yeah. But I think it's more of an ingrained sort of sentiment of the culture. Like, I bet if you talk to some of the guys at Groupon, they'd feel they're sort of still in a startup company.
Exactly.
And it's just sort of the cultural aspect of the company, I think, is the biggest sort of. So whatever you feel yourself, and that's why I said, depending on the situation, you know, it'll
because Groupon it's new, but they earn a lot of money. So what is the measure of a startup? Is it the money or the time or the people, but maybe it depends then.
I think it's the people and it's the intangibles that create the culture around what it.
How do you think we would define a startup in Sweden?
I don't know, it's a really new word. But I think it's very much connected to the tech culture. You don't say I have a startup, a cafe.
No,
probably not.
It's something. It's connected to innovation. It's connected to product development. It's usually connected to some kind of coding. But I think it's also connected to the rate of growth. Because, you know, some people you meet, and I'm an entrepreneur, and we're starting this company. I've been doing this for 2 years, and we're now 2 employees, and I plan in 5 years we're going to be another 4. And and in the startup world is almost damaged by the visions of all the great ones who grow to thousands of employees with that. But you know, I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, because I think we definitely have a problem in Sweden that we don't want to grow fast enough. And I think that's the good part about the startup. It's you're actually aiming for the stars. You're not just saying, well, I'm going to build a healthy company.
But when it's tied to IT, you have to move fast. Because you have Indian and Chinese programmers looking to just steal your idea anyways within 2 weeks. And I mean, that's the reality of it. So you need to build up really quick and get that momentum and sort of have that exciting kind of
But all industries are running faster. Because if you start up something, someone else is going to take your idea and start doing the same thing somewhere else.
Yeah, but I mean, like a cafe has been around for... And those sort of brick and mortar relationships and businesses have been around for a long time, whereas the IT sector is moving at light speed, and it's exhausting to keep up. So.
But one reflection that I saw when I visited Silicon Valley compared to Sweden, if we should do some kind of comparisons, was that what I figured was that a lot of people in Silicon Valley, they're working on their product for like 3 months and building something and try to get the momentum up and then get the funding. And it's one product at a time. So it's very fast paced. If you compare to Sweden, we actually have the luxury in a sense to go a little bit slower than that. There is no one actually sitting behind you and looking at exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. Be prepared to copy exactly everything. So we have a little bit more time in that sense, and we also have the luxury to be involved in different kind of companies and projects, which is very exciting. So I guess the speed-wise, Silicon Valley is great. If you want some kind of diversity in what you're doing, Sweden is a great market for that.
Yeah, I think that we are going to meet a guy that has been involved in a startup, and I think he's going to speak a lot about it. So we're switching over to an interview with John Sjölander från BERT.
Jag heter John Sjölander, jag är CTO på ett bolag som heter BERT. Vi jobbar med reklamteknik. Första gången som jag anställde någon så var jag nog inte mogen att anställa någon. Nej, jag tror inte det. Nu när jag har anställt ytterligare ett 20-tal personer under min karriär då, så har jag blivit ganska bra. Jag har lärt mig att man måste intervjua ungefär 10 gånger så många som man behöver anställa. Och man måste screena ytterligare 10 gånger så många. Så jag vill screena kanske 1000 pers för att anställa 15 nördar på Burt liksom. Risken är att anställa någon, att anställa fel person, är ju naturligtvis kopiöst stor. Och dåliga människor är cancer i en organisation. Tyvärr märker man inte det förrän sent, så att jag vet inte. Jag vill uppmuntra alla entreprenörer att provanställa och exercera provanställningen ifall de känner att det inte är en bra fit. Liksom, att det inte... Jag tror inte att dagens ungdom är mindre drivna. Jag tror inte nödvändigtvis att de är mer drivna heller. Jag tror de är driftigare. Man ser möjligheter där man inte såg det för kanske 50 år sedan. Min mamma och pappa, fantastiska människor, men det var nog lite tydligare vart de skulle gå. Man ser möjligheter där man inte såg det i tidigare generationer. Men sen tror jag att folk är lika lata idag som då. Jag tror absolut att folk är påhittigare idag. Alltså ärligt talat, det finns skitbra folk i Sverige. Tyvärr så finns det skitbra folk på skittråkiga företag. Typ. Alltså folk går ju till stora biltillverkare när de borde gå till spjutspetsbolag. Jag tror verkligen inte att man behöver ändra på någonting, för det är upp till oss som bolag att se till att rekrytera rätt människor. Om man vill så här, ändra på LAS eller någonting, då har man bara inte gjort sitt jobb. Ja, men det är en jävla gnälleri. Det är fan inte upp till politikerna att skapa bra företagarklimat. Det är upp till företagarna att göra det. Ibland alltså att välja och börja anställa folk, right? För det är ett val. Du är en person, du behöver ha en till. Det är ett risktagande. Om man kan underlätta för det risktagandet då, så att du vet, jag vet inte, sänka arbetsgivaravgiften för den första anställda, någonting annat som man gör det billigare möjligen. Men alltså, kostnaden är inte det som är problemet med att anställa sin första. Det är ju vem man vill ha in. Att man vill ha någon som brinner för det lika mycket som du vill. Och det är inte så jävla givet om den personen ska få en lön istället för aktier. Liksom. Jag skulle gärna se att man, för att kunna motivera de tidiga anställda i just IT-bolag då, som växer snabbt och ökar värde snabbt. Jag skulle gärna se att det var lättare för oss att ge dem optioner utan att vi ska behöva krångla med liksom, kommer vi upptaxeras här och betala uteblivna sociala avgifter liksom. Det är jätteproblematiskt, för jag vill knyta den talangen till mig, och jag vill också ge dem möjligheten att liksom, skörda sina egna frukter liksom. Alltså, utbildningen i Sverige får bli duktigare på att tala om för folk att det finns en möjlighet att göra något eget efter utbildningen. Och politikerna kan absolut stimulera det, men det måste återigen vara upp till folk. Alltså, det är vi entreprenörer som måste bygga vår egen framtid. Vi kan inte förvänta oss att politikerna ska göra det. Vi kan inte förvänta oss att våra föräldrar ska göra det. Vi kan inte förvänta någonting. Så är det själva. Så här, du är din egen lyckas med. Det är enkelt.
Yep.
All right, and we're back in the studio in Entrepreneurial Chase Live, Entreprenörsjakten Live. And we saw Jon Sjölander from Burt, an interview with him. And Gustav, do you want to translate some of his quotes
I just
to English?
He's kind of controversial, I think. But you know, he said that he hates people who whines about laws and that we have too strict laws for hiring people and for too high taxes, because it's basically only people who can't run a business who whines about that. Because if you do your work well, it's your responsibility to provide, to build a good business. You can't ask your parents, you can't ask the politicians. It's your responsibility to build a business. And it's a very strong opinion, but you know, it resonates. I mean, entrepreneurship is basically about yourself. You can't go around and whine and say that, okay, that's, well, it's their fault and they're doing it the wrong way. So,
and it was also talking in the beginning about employing people, and they were a startup for some time ago. I don't know the definition of them now, but
I think they're about 15 today.
15 people, yeah, all right. Anyway, he said that the wrong person in his organization is cancer. And how have you been working with creating teams in your businesses?
I don't know if there is a wrong person. I don't think you can make it as clear cut as cancer. I think it's because I think if you were a good manager and if you weren't bullheaded, you would find a way. You brought them in for some reason, right? Especially when you only have the payroll for 10 people, say. You don't have an HR manager, you don't have all this kind of stuff. It's you interviewing the person. So I mean, there's some responsibility. You brought them in for some reason. So to all of a sudden turn around and say, well, they're a cancer. It's more of a fault, I think, on the management part of it. I think you have to figure out where this person would excel at, and you're just not meeting those, you're just not allowing them to meet those expectations that you originally held from them. But I mean, I have a hard time seeing it when you're in a startup phase of identifying someone like, okay, we got to get rid of them. You know, that's just sort of a lazy way of doing it, I think. And that breeds a weird culture within the startup right away. That's my opinion on it.
So what do you think is the most important things to think about when you're employing your first people and creating the team in the business?
It's funny because when my partner and I were talking about, okay, we're going to have this company and we need to pick a president and a vice president, whatever. we had some beers and we flipped a coin, and like I won, you know. And looking back, that's just a stupid way of doing it. Right? But you did it. But I think so many startup individuals or entrepreneurs say, "It's my idea. I'm the CEO." But that's not necessarily the way you should do it. You know, it says it's my idea, but I need a CEO or I need a CTO or I need somebody that can sort of execute on what I can't. And you have to have a humbleness about you and be able to recognize your weaknesses and then accept. You know, maybe you have to know your role and kind of punch your weight is what I say. You know, you might be out of your weight class. Your idea might be good, but you're just a terrible salesperson. So just sort of punch your weight and move back and let somebody do it. And I think so many people, they just get in this sort of bullheaded, you know, like the Zuckerberg movie that came out that idealized kind of bulldoze his way through. I have a feeling that wasn't exactly how it went down. It was just sort of the Hollywood dramatized sort of version of it. And I think too many people get caught up in that. They need to take a step back and let others sort of fill the gaps. All right. You can still call yourself founder on your business card, man, but you don't have to necessarily sell the product if you sweat every time you get in front of people.
We'll come back to the studio here, and we're moving over to Gothenburg and the company Mind Your Own Business.
Med oss från Göteborg har vi laget Who Ate All the Pies. Vilka är ni?
Hej, mitt namn är Tommy Stavroga. Här är Erik Frisk och Erik Göransson.
Hur kommer det sig att ni valde att vara med i Entreprenörsjakten?
Ja, vi tyckte det lät som en väldigt kul grej. Som något som skulle hjälpa oss att utvecklas lite och lära känna lite mer folk och nya företag och ta oss an lite utmaningar som ska hjälpa oss att utvecklas, tror jag.
Pröva vår kreativitetskapacitet.
Hur har dagen gått hittills?
Den har gått, det har varit upp och neråt. Den första uppgiften gick väldigt bra, tycker vi. Den andra gick lite sådär, men det är en viktig del i entreprenörskap att kunna acceptera att ibland går det bra, ibland går det dåligt, men att lära sig om det går dåligt. Så vi tror att det kommer förbättra oss i andra delen av tävlingen när vi fortsätter.
Hur ser ni på motståndet?
Ja, det verkar väldigt tufft, ska jag säga. Företagen som jag har träffat, de verkar väldigt nöjda, vilket är oroande när man kommer in i rummet och presenterar för oss. Så att det är en väldigt tuff konferens.
Tack så mycket från team Who Ate All the Pies. Tack.
Ja, och vi är tillbaka nu switchar jag mellan engelska och svenska. We're back in the studio in Stockholm with Entrepreneurial Chase Live, eller Entreprenörsjakten Live. And they were very honest there, telling us that they failed in the mission.
In one of the tests. I think that's very brave. And saying like, halfway through, okay, so we messed up one step. Now we're gonna go back at it. And actually, that's I tried to throw in small things to screw with people throughout the competition, and that's one of the things we've talked about. This never been done, but last year I wanted to send a text message to everyone about 1 hour, 1.5 before the day is over, and send a text message and say some of the results are in and you're not doing that well right now. And just to see what happens when people get that. I got voted down. People thought it was a bad idea, but
That's bad.
well, gotta be mean.
We met the team here, and we were talking about teams in businesses also before the interview. Would you like to add something to the team discussion about the team?
Sure, especially the founding team. One thing I've seen meeting with entrepreneurial team over the years is that what usually gets forgotten is the fact that before you actually start the company and start to execute this exciting idea, right, to sit down and have a talk about what's your goal and vision in this. And back to the why question that we talked before, why are you doing this? And do you have an exit strategy? Do you have a time frame that you cannot be able to do this for a longer period of time? To have that honest talk about the different founders is so useful down the line, because a lot of companies have been split up just because they didn't have the talk, because they didn't really understand each other. They thought they understood each other because they're so excited by the product and the idea, but they haven't really thought about the personal aspect of it. So that is one advice that I think is quite useful for teams to actually consider.
And especially if you're starting up with friends.
Yeah.
I mean, the closer you are to the people you're starting a business with, the more important it is that you actually have the talk about, okay, what happens if we don't get everything we want all the time,
Yeah.
People forget about that too, because most of these, when you're in your 20s, early 20s, and you start your first business, you don't set the KPIs, you don't set all the boring stuff that you have to do in a normal job, basically, and you don't have those discussions, and you don't sign that paperwork with your potential business partner, and then 6 months, 8 months, the lines get blurred, and you don't know whose responsibility it is, and then you both end up being pissed off at each other, and I mean, that's probably the worst thing to happen in a business when you start it with a friend. So I think people need to be really, really diligent. I know here, like contracts and everything, there's sort of this, it's not as robust as in North America. And I think it needs to be, at least in this industry, in this sort of context, is people really need to be really careful about when they deal with family and friends, and to go that extra mile and sign that extra paper, I think. It just makes things a lot smoother as you go forward.
And we have 24 teams out here not running businesses today in this competition, but competing in solving problems and coming up with ideas. So they have to match each other as persons. How do the participants choose their teams and their teammates?
Well, we actually had first year we actually had some teams who picked their own teams, and some teams who were just you applied by yourself, and they were randomized. Yeah. And it was just the ones who were put together, the ones who were they created themselves were so much stronger. So we couldn't defend, having the random part there, and it's also better in so many ways to have them actually find it. But when we go through the applications, there's actually a factor. We want them to show diversity, to show in what way, how they put the team together, and what are their distinct skills and their distinct backgrounds. So it's because it is an advantage of having a lot of different skill sets and knowledge in the team.
And the entrepreneurial chase that's what it's really about, the people, and not one business idea. But if you have a business idea and you have to start up and you need funding, what is the most important to think of, and now maybe you can relate to the Swedish market, but in America,
I think maybe get a really good ski mask and go to a town that no one knows you, and walk into a convenience store. I mean, you really have to beg, borrow, and steal a lot of times, and people invest in you, so it's easy to say I'm an entrepreneur which means I'm not going to cut my hair and I'm going to wear raggedy jeans because that's like the entrepreneurial thing to do, and then roll into some office and be like, hey, I got this great idea. You don't know me, but it's a great idea, so give me some money. And people get so jaded and shocked that when that doesn't actually get handed over to them by complete strangers. And I think you need to have, first and foremost, an air of professionalism about you, no matter how old you are, no matter if you're selling a 1987 Honda Accord, you need to wash that Honda Accord. Like, you need to do everything that you can to present yourself as a responsible person. And that transcends age. But I think a lot of young people get caught up in the sort of the image of what it's like to be your own boss and flip-flops and pajama shorts. And
the Mark Zuckerberg style.
Yeah. And also, your family members and your friends and your extended family, they'll invest in you if you have a good idea. Like, they have to treat you as an external person. They might say, well, grandma might throw you down a grand or something like that, but in the end you need probably about $100,000-$200,000 just to really get something viable to get going. So you need to present yourself to friends and family the same way you would present yourself to a stranger. And it's a hard work, it's a grind, and it's not easy, and you just, like I said, beg, borrow, and steal to get to that point. But if you have a good idea and you present yourself well, eventually somebody will come around. And there's a lot of really good, especially in North America, a lot of really good angel investment groups that you can go to and pitch your idea just for the initial angel investment, and then you can build up that and take it to the next level and get a VC investment and that type of thing. But Y Combinator, for instance, in San Francisco is excellent. So there's a lot of really, really good groups out there if you just showcase yourself, right?
I think that goes back to what a startup is, because earlier we talked about the entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship in Sweden is, the word entrepreneurship has become very, very popular. When the leader of the left-wing party says we need more entrepreneurship in Sweden, there's something going on. And the question is, what does this word mean to politicians, to people? Because we see a lot of people starting businesses in Sweden, a lot of young people starting businesses in Sweden, but they're not hiring. They're just starting, okay, I want to do my own thing, I want to find freedom, I want to be self-employed. But how do we get those people, how do we encourage them to take the next step? Because if we really want to create growth in the country, it's the next step. It's a startup step, going from the self-employed to the, having the guts to hire the first person and having the vision to hire the first person. How do we create that?
I mean, I think it sounds a little like the lagom kind of mentality, where it's just enough. You have your summer house and you have your thing, and I think that's just ingrained in the culture, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So if someone is self-sufficient and they're able to get to a certain level, why push for that extra point? And there's actually a lot of good argument, like, why keep pushing for that extra, person, for that extra headache, just for that extra X amount of dollars? And I think that intertwines cultural, political, sociological aspects that I'm not an expert on in Sweden, so maybe you can save me on this one. But
well, I think it comes to two things. First of all, the reason, again, why are you starting in the first place? Are you looking to be self-employed? Is that what your goal with this business idea is? Or do you want to become a business owner and create a bigger company and create this kind of growth you're talking about? So that's question number one. I think number two is more connected to show that it's possible and to create a support system, more general support system, where we actually make the opportunity to that entrepreneurs support each other in order to take it to the next step, and then gradually show success cases that this is possible, this is the upside, and this is why this is so great.
All right, or maybe you go to San Francisco to get the funding.
But it's funny because you're sort of a product of your own environment, and you get inspired and you get pushed. I mean, when I was in Southern California, I found myself, okay, I had 3 cars and like for no reason, you know, but just people around you have that, and people around you are talking about certain dynamics, and you sort of get absorbed into that, and the good and the bad. But I think if you go into an environment, and you know, Sweden's an interesting case because there's a lot of really small but very robust communities in entrepreneurial realm that I've just discovered, networking and everything else. And if you absorb yourself and dive into those, it's amazing how far I think people will push themselves, and just surrounding yourselves with those types of people. Or it might help to move out, you know, move to an area like California or even New York or Chicago, and stay there for 6 months and see how things move in those types of cities, and Germany too, and kind of get a feel for how really fast-paced things can bring, and then bring it back over here inspired.
The first prize in the entrepreneurial chase is a trip to San Francisco, and I think, you know, going to a place like that is great for inspiration. Meeting Google and meeting the people working at Facebook or whatever, but we have other things here that doesn't exist here, and there are many great opportunities. For one, you have to pay 5 times the salary for a programmer in Silicon Valley than you have to do in Stockholm, or in Gothenburg is even cheaper. So just starting up away from because I mean, we all got broadband, so I mean, there's a lot of advantages of not being there. Plus, we have the local market. Sweden's often used as a prototype market for new products because we're very affluent, a lot of early adopters. So there are companies who use this as a prototype market, and we speak Swedish, so it doesn't leak too much into the other markets if they fuck up. So it is a good place to be.
Yeah, and there's a big difference between the culture in, for example, San Francisco and Sweden, and you can learn a lot from San Francisco example through winning the entrepreneurial chase and going there. Anyway, I think we're going to take a break now for like lunch for us. And then we'll be back with Carl Fredrik Sameli från Prime PR. Switcha över till det svenska här. Men we thank you for being here this hour. And,
pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Very good having you here.
Thanks, it was fun.
And have a good weekend when this day is over.
You too.
And vi är tillbaka om... när är vi tillbaka? Klockan 2. Vi är tillbaka om en timme den här gången. Så att vi tar lite lunchpaus och ses om en timme, och så ska vi få träffa Carl Fredrik och mer intervjuer, mer deltagare utifrån tävlingsuppdragen. Ha det gott så länge. Hej!